by the end of this training, you will know the formula for crushing your sales numbers, a 3-step process for executing with excellence in your business. We're going to talk about some of the key things that everyone is searching for: how to generate accountability, how to generate buy-in, how to create ownership to executing the plan. And one of the most important things we're going to cover off, and you're going to see, is the power of metrics. If you can't measure it, it doesn't get done. I'm sure you'll all agree that a combination of what we say brilliant strategy, execution excellence, if you're able to get those two together, your organization is guaranteed for success. And I know many pharmaceutical companies are great at developing brand plans. They have rigorous processes in place. On the execution planning, I would say most don't have any process and really leave execution to chance. And maybe you guys can relate to this. But my message today, as I said earlier, is if you want to crush your sales numbers, don't leave execution to chance. So when I say pharmaceutical, I'm talking about biotech, I'm talking about medical devices, I'm talking about medical equipment, so the healthcare area. And we all know that we're a research-based industry, right? We present our drugs with research. So whenever I present, and I guess it's just where I come from, whenever I present stuff, I really do want to make sure I'm looking at the latest research and can share the latest research with you. In fact, there's much more research done when I've done my research on strategy development than there is on execution. And I think that speaks to the problem. So I want to share some of the research that I've done, who it's from, because there's some real leaders in the area of execution, and want to share those with you. So there's a well-known anecdotal business statistic that says 90% of companies fail to execute on their strategies. So I found a number of places, and we traced that back to this gentleman, Robert Kaplan. He's a professor at Harvard Business School. He's authored 14 books, business books, over 150 papers, including 23 Harvard Business Review papers. And in his book, which is called The Execution Premium, he concluded that 90% of companies fail to execute. And I found this figure incredibly mind-blowing, as I'm sure all companies really do want to execute. The problem is they haven't planned out how they're going to do it, so how do they know if they're even successful? The next piece of research, which is just a recent Harvard Business Review from March 2015, and there was really 3 really interesting findings in a paper that said, or an article that said, why strategy execution unravels and what to do about it. So the first finding was that in a survey of 40, and it's a recent survey of 40 global CEOs, found that executional excellence was the #1 issue facing corporate leaders around the world. And there was a list of 80 issues, including stuff like innovation, geopolitical instability, top-line sales growth, and of all those, the other 70 or so, executional excellence topped their list of concerns. Secondly, they quoted a study, which talked about how difficult it is to execute. And what they found is somewhere between 2/3 and 3/4 of large companies fail to implement their strategies effectively. And the last piece was a study of 125,000 employees, which were in more than 1,000 companies. They also looked at government agencies and non-for-profit organizations in 50 countries. And employees, when surveyed, rated their company, 60% of them rated their company weak at execution. Wow. This quote here, from Ram Charan, I want to just share with you who Ram is. He's an advisor to many senior executives and board of directors. He's known throughout the world for his insights into why companies are successful and why others are not. He has authored over 20 business books, and of course a couple in the area of execution. This book, which we got the quote from, Execution, the Discipline of Getting Things Done. And he says 70% of strategic failures are due to poor execution of leadership. it's rarely due to not having the smarts or the vision. So execution and leadership's involvement is critical for success. The next person I want to share with you is Morris Chang. And Morris is the founding chairman of Taiwan Semiconductor Manufacturing Company, which is the largest silicon foundry in the world. These guys are like the Intel of the Far East. And he says, and I think this is amazing, without strategy, execution is aimless. Without execution, strategy is useless. So the two go hand in hand. So let's make sure we're all working on the same page. And I try to keep things very simple, so one, I can understand them, and two, I can explain them. So if we were to look and say, let's get on the same page and have the same definition of execution. And how I define it as execution is the discipline of getting the most important things done. So there's two components. One is discipline, and two is really about focusing down and figuring what the most important things are. So given the research has shown that many companies struggle to execute, if your division or your business unit is struggling, the impact, from my perspective, and I've seen it firsthand, could be catastrophic. So poor execution, is not good. In fact, it's bad. And I've seen leaders whose teams are struggling to execute, and they find that their customers are frustrated, right? Because they're not delivering on what they said they're going to deliver. Their team is disengaged. They face challenges in making their sales numbers. And many of them that I work with find themselves stressed at the end of each month because their numbers aren't coming in, and they really hate having to explain performance gaps at quarterly business reviews with senior management. So leaders who have left their execution to chance really get forced into a bad spot. They become accepting of mediocre performance. There's no way that they even have expectations of being a top performing business unit. They spend a lot of time, far too much time, searching for the answers as to why they're not making it. You can see them in the hall because their stress levels, they're running around and their stress levels are high, they're constantly busy, and guess what? They end up working much harder than their colleagues who are much more organized and focused on execution. And I don't want this to be any of you, because I remember how frustrating it was when the company would hand over marketing strategies. I was VP of sales. They wouldn't sort of give us execution guidelines, and then they would get upset when sales numbers were not coming in. And there's an old adage, which I didn't quote here, but just thought about, which one of my good friends would always say, and he doesn't take, Paul doesn't take that the quote is his, but he used to always tell me, when everything works, it's great marketing strategy. When it fails, it's poor sales execution, right? And those of you who run just sales understand exactly what I'm talking about. And the other thing is, I believe that you deserve and are 100% capable, when I share my training with you, of crushing your sales numbers. So one of the things I want to do is just compare strategy in most companies versus execution. So if you look from a very simplistic level, and I'm applying this to many of the healthcare companies that I've worked for and worked with, strategy development, when you're doing brand planning, companies probably spend upwards of 2 months analyzing their brands, analyzing their markets, their competitors, and really figuring out where they sit, what their growth trends are. On the execution side, you're lucky. Companies are really lucky if they spend more than 2 days with their sales management team talking about how to execute. On the strategy development side, most companies, most large multinational companies, have very well-defined marketing processes. Okay, so the marketer, basically has templates they need to run through, and it's very formalized. On the execution side, there's no process. I'd be happy if anyone had a process to share with me. I'll share one with you. What they end up developing is detailed brand plans, okay, with strategies and tactics and timing and growth and, dollar sales, dollar investment. On the execution side, there's no formal plan ever developed. Now, if you look at the strategy, usually, there's key metrics like market share and growth targets. On the execution side, which I always find really funny, is there are no metrics. So how do you know if you've ever been successful? And that's really one of the challenges. So again, if you look at strategy plus execution equals success, then where most companies are struggling is not on the strategy side. It's about driving execution. So I want to share with you 10 elements that have come out of my research in the area of really delivering incredible execution, or what some people call executional excellence. And these are 10 items. There's no rank order in terms of priority. They're all really important elements to the process. So number one, planning. If you're not going to spend any time planning or build a plan, forget about it. You're lost. Focus. Some companies try to focus on too many things. One of the key things about execution is really dwindling down or finding out the 2 or 3, maybe 4 things that are going to make you successful if you focus on them. So you're really about refining your focus to what's critical. Alignment. You need to make sure your team, your sales and marketers are well aligned and they have clarity. So they're clear as to what's important. One of the biggest issues we face, and I'll show you a great slide coming up, but this whole idea of, if you give them the plan, it's your plan. If they are involved in the process, then automatically there's buy-in and there's ownership. In a lot of cases, that's something that's lacking. Accountability, well, the only way people are going to be accountable is if they have specific numbers and that you have a process to hold them accountable. Leadership is critical because execution is not just in the course of 2 days or 3 days planning. It's about leading the way throughout the year. Having support of other departments, and sometimes departments are aligned, but the operational or support departments are just not there to do that. One of the other key things, and we'll talk about today, is the last 2 is metrics and discipline. And if you don't have metrics, and I'm not talking metrics like sales or or growth numbers. I'm talking about metrics that actually look at how well you're executing. If you don't have those and you don't have the discipline to review those, well, all this work breaks down. So here's the exciting part. The reality is we all know it's not easy to execute. We all know companies are struggling. I don't think I'm telling you anything you don't know. But what I'm very excited today to share with you is my 3-step process to crushing your sales numbers by executing with excellence. And let me run through it. And I talked about this earlier. So step 1, you need to build a plan, right? Without a plan, if it's not written, if it's not formalized, then nobody else remembers. You need a lead execution. Execution is not just something that you come up with a plan. It's about following through with your people, and maybe it's your salespeople, maybe it's your marketing folks, but following through and leading them to execute what they said they're going to do. And then there's a whole component of what I call management discipline, which really comes down to tracking and reviewing the metrics that you come up with to track execution on a monthly basis and on a quarterly basis, maybe in greater detail, of how execution is going. Leading, tracking, and reviewing is an ongoing process, right? And if you look at it from a calendar perspective, next 2 months, as I said, is critical, or next month and a half, maybe sometime into January. It's really critical that you build your plan. Otherwise, you're not really starting the year off and running or have clarity or alignment or ownership into how you're going to execute. And then the rest of the year is basically leading the execution and having management discipline to follow up and make sure things are on track. And I think this adage works incredibly well. In business, no one plans to fail, yet many fail to plan. And when I look at the industries specifically that I've geared this to, they do a great job planning. But what they plan is their marketing strategies and tactics. They neglect to plan how they're going to execute those. So I'm going to take you through building the plan in greater detail, because that is the key step you really need to put in place. So I'm going to break that down into a series of steps and run through my thinking and I think sort of best practices. And if you think about those 10 elements, I'm going to circle back to those and see what the first step in the process does. And within the building the plan, the number one thing to start with is, what are your critical success factors? It's not about what are your strategies, and really what a critical success factor is is identifying the things that really matter for success. Okay, so if we train our reps to be top in their area, that's a critical success factor. I'm not saying it's for each company, but that's a critical success factor. So what we do is we find works best is to bring the whole team in to set up a planning meeting, including sales management and marketing management. And really, as you see these folks working through their meeting, it's getting them to brainstorm and really come up with 2 or 3 key things, maybe 4, one group pushed me to 5, that they have to do extremely well to crush their sales numbers. So again, it comes down to critical success factors, everyone having some input, and then as a team, really refining down and prioritizing those 3 things, which is a manageable number, to do that are going to make you successful. It's not a bit, and that's really where the focus comes in. After you've done that, after as a team, you've identified, prioritized your critical success factors, then the challenge becomes is, well, how are you going to do those? And that's always a hard part, right? Developing the how-tos. But you need to have an action plan. You need to think through how you're going to be successful in that critical area, or how you're going to achieve your critical success factors. So again, it means bringing the team together to build their own plan on how they're going to do that, and of course to vet it and work it through as a team. The third component, once you've got your critical success factors, you developed how you're going to get there, you know, as Tom Peters says, what gets measured gets done. And he's the famous writer of #1 national bestseller book, In Search of Excellence. I think was popular in the 80s and 90s, but Tom Peters is well recognized as a guru in the area of management. Okay, and here's a guy, let's call him Joe. And I'm just going to have a quick drink, but you can read this. And I'm not sure if I hear the laughter, but I kind of chuckle at this. And Joe is a prime example of when you don't have metrics, people make up crazy reasons why they're not successful. Okay, and the last step, once you've got your critical success factors, you figure out how you're going to achieve each one of them, you have metrics, is to put that into a written plan and also develop a scorecard which on a monthly basis tracks those key metrics you want to track. So just in summary, there are 4 steps, maybe arguably 5, involved in building your execution plan. And if you consider the brand planning process, it takes a month or 2 minimum. We crunch that down, that process, into 2 days. Okay, and if you remember, so you know, if you're not spending those 2 days, you know, you're really not set to crush your sales numbers or set to execute. And I think, hey, if you have good strategies, you'll probably do good. But if you have good strategies and excellence in execution, that's a situation that you can crush your numbers. So let's look, and if you look at the tick marks, these are the ones that building an execution plan solves. One, from a planning perspective, you get everyone to plan it. You're going to get focus on the 2 or 3 key things that are crucial. You'll have alignment amongst the management team as to what is crucial and what each team, sales and marketing, need to do to make that successful. There's clarity. Okay, everyone who's gone through the process is clear on what's important. Through involving people in a planning process, you naturally build buy-in and ownership to the plan, because it's not your plan as the business unit leader, it's their plan. Okay, and if you look at the fact that we built in the metrics, we actually create accountability. When they develop the plan, 2, they set the metrics. So, you know, it's not you as the business unit head, you're part of the process, but immediately you're able to check off 7 of the 10 elements by putting the first step in place. Okay, second step, and I just want to get into it just very briefly, but you know, again, recognizing how important the first step is, and you really can't do the first one, it's sequential. You know, you can't do the second or third without the first one being in place. So leading execution, and this again came from Ram Charan, who I think had, as I said, 20 business books and is an expert. Execution is the job of the business leader. And really, as the business leader, it's up to you to coach and mentor your team. which really looks at holding monthly one-on-one meetings, making sure each of your leaders has a development plan, and they're also doing it for their team, and that you have a process in place that you're reviewing on a monthly basis with them one-on-one how they are proceeding, and that they're actually driving that process as a leader of their region or their product. Step 3, what I call management discipline. And I'm not sure who this quote came from. I tried to find out, but it's in my book. But your people respect what you inspect. So if you're not going back and looking at the metrics, guess what? They're going to be forgotten. So it's very critical that we, not every day. And I used to have a boss who, we'd plant the seed, and every single day he'd dig it up to see why it's not growing. That's micromanagement. What I'm saying is, on a periodic basis, maybe it's once a month, that you actually go over the numbers with the people and hope that they're in a position where they're actually driving that and coming to you saying, okay, I'm off on this and this is what I'm doing about it. And that's where the leadership comes in. But management really needs to have that discipline in place that thinking happens. And really what it looks like, it's really about tracking your success. And if you're not on track, or things are not happening, you could always adapt your plan, your strategies, your execution tactics. But really, when I look at monthly and quarterly business reviews, okay, you need to be tracking and talking about those critical success factors and the metrics you have. What are some of the key deliverables that people have committed to? And also, I truly believe, as a leadership expert, that part of what all leaders need to be doing is having individual development plans for their people. So as an organization, we're all getting better. So I just want to summarize here, and after I summarize, maybe I'll just take a quick drink as my throat gets a little dry. But what we've talked about is, number one, execution is not an easy thing to do. Whether it's 60%, 70, 80, or 90% of organizations are having a challenge executing their strategy. It's more than the average. It's more than half the companies are having those issues. Again, most employees, more than half, are saying their organization is weak at execution. And really the key is, it's really up to leadership to take a stand and saying, hey, we're going to get great at execution. I've shared with you a 3-step process that creates a plan. It also creates leadership and management discipline around the plan. And my key message, and I'll repeat it again, some people say you have to repeat things 8 times for folks to remember, so hopefully at least one walkaway you'll have from this session is, execution is key to crushing your sales numbers. So let me just take a drink, and while I do that, I want to come back and take another poll, and AJ, if you can tee it up for me. And really what I want to get a sense is, now that you've gone through this training, do you feel like you are well positioned to crush your numbers in 2017? So same question, but really I want to know if this training is going to help you be in a better position to do so. And I'll take a little drink while we run the poll. Okay. Okay. So AJ, you've closed it up. Thank you, everybody, for your input. And just to review where we started, it looks like we moved from 57% of folks feeling like they're in a good position to crush their numbers to 67%. And conversely, so 2/3 are feeling really good about things. And we've actually had a 10% drop in people who on the converse drop, that 33% of people again feel that they may need some more help. So I'm actually really glad with the results of the training. I wish I could do more. And what I'd like to do is extend an offer to those who are interested in putting into action what I've shared today in a very simple and effective way. So we have 2 options here. And one is, hey, you know what? there is a real big gap in terms of where we are from an execution perspective. So we can either go ahead and delve into a little bit more and help those folks who need help, and maybe even help those folks who are feeling really good now. And here's one of the challenges we face, and we call it the big gap. And the big gap between information that you get, which we just shared today, and execution. And I realize some of you right now may be thinking, I get it. What Stephen taught me is simple, and I'm ready to get to work. Yet, if you did some research into psychology, you realize the truth is, and it's called the forgetting curve. And it was delivered by a gentleman by the name of Herman Ebbinghaus. And he did some research, and he found that within 1 hour, people have forgotten an average of 50% of what they were taught. And within 24 hours, it's 70%. And basically, within a week, pretty much all of it is lost. Now, I know some of you may be saying to yourself, but I've taken good notes. I'm really good. And if you're anything like me, I have a notebook full of notes. And I have the greatest intentions to follow through. Yet the reality is, many of them sit on the shelf or just get put away. And that's the truth for many people. You're probably not bridging the gap between what you've learned and putting into action. It's very much like execution. Even with this training being solid and actionable, I know it's not enough. And I know you need more if you're serious about executing with excellence and crushing your sales numbers. So I'm going to start talking about my offer now. And as I do, I'm going to continue to give solid, actionable content. So let me introduce it to you. I spoke about it briefly earlier. It's called the STAR Business Execution Program. And it's got 3 components. And the first one, and it's really a combination of rigorous training, coaching, and consulting. So step 1 is really about a workshop that we put on, and we facilitate your team in building their execution plan. Step 2, many leaders are busy and they have challenges really coaching and mentoring their people. So we're able to offer that, and that's one of my areas of expertise. And we coach in 2 areas. One is we coach along execution to make sure they're focused on their critical success factors. And 2, we coach on developing their leadership skills. 3, we create, manage, and report on your critical success factors if you don't have the resources to do it. And really it involves tracking your key metrics and committing to a business review process. So the question is, who's it for? Who benefits the most? And as I said earlier, the training that we had, and I know the folks who are buying in are either VPs of sales and marketing, business unit directors, VPs and directors of sales, or national sales managers, and we've had really good traction in the healthcare industries. So if you're content with just making your numbers next year, hey, this really isn't for you. If you want to crush your numbers in 2017, then I'm glad you're on this training, and I invite you to take the first step. And the first step is having me come and work with your team in an interactive workshop, which culminates in building your execution plan. And the first step is really critical. It'll set your team up for success. So we run your team through on this workshop, a 2-day, highly interactive, everyone's working, everyone's contributing, and we facilitate your team in building their business execution plan. By the end of those 2 days, we've got all the rough notes, and we'll go back and draft your plan for you. Okay, and in the workshop, we follow the same process I talked about. We identify, prioritize, and get the team to agree on the 3 critical success factors. We help them build a plan how to get there, determine how to measure success, and then really, at the end of the day, it creates an alignment between sales and marketing. And the outcomes that you get through building this business execution plan is the team is highly aligned. You got clarity on what's critical for success. You have a focus on how to get there. Folks are bought into the plan because they own the plan. And then you have accountability built in or baked into the metrics. So, I really, given the webinar format, I really want to make this a no-risk offer. And at the end of the day, I normally sell the program as a complete program for an entire year. And we have a number of clients already signed up to the program. But I want to help you as a company as much as I can. And the best way I can do that is to reduce the risk for you. And by basically saying, hey, we're going to have you just look at step one and come in and do a 2-day business execution workshop to put you in position to crush your sales numbers. And if you're not completely satisfied with the work, there's no obligation for step 2 and 3, but you walk away with a working execution plan which can easily drive incremental 2 to 5% of your sales. So what's your investment? I asked several of my clients, what they'd be willing to pay. And some of them are in this neighborhood, and they said, to have 2-day workshop plus have our plan written up, we're looking at $12,000 plus. And I could charge that and go to bed feeling good about it, because I have a detailed execution plan which will provide 1 to 2% more sales. And if you're a $50 million business, you're looking at an extra $500,000 to $1 million in sales. And that's like a 40 times or 80 times ROI. But I'm committed to creating success stories and want to see you crush your sales numbers. So I decided to offer the workshop at $7,500, which again includes 2 days of facilitation wherever you are in the world. There may be some travel to cover on that. And then we'll also take away from that and write up your plan and have it ready for you to go. 1, to present maybe to senior management, and 2, to have a working document that you can use throughout the year. But you know what, I thought, okay, that's great. How do we make sure it happens? And what I've decided to do is have a special bonus. And we usually charge for this, but for this webinar only, I will set up 4 follow-up phone calls at the quarter. So, after March, after June, and we'll set up 4 follow-up calls with you to make sure that you're on track for hitting your numbers. And that I charge, 4 calls at an hour or more is $2,000. But the trick is, if you want to get this $2,000 extra value, you need to book a meeting with me by Thursday. It doesn't mean we have to talk by Thursday. It means you need to book a meeting with me and speak by the end of next week. I know people are busy, and even finding time to come onto this webinar, many folks were unable to make it who want to make it. So if you set up the phone call and we talk before the end of next week, you'll get the following from our workshop: a highly aligned sales team, ownership of the plan, much improved communication and understanding between sales and marketing, executional excellence, and team accountability. And all you got to do is go to www.starresults.com. Let's talk. And from there, you can book an appointment into my calendar. I've got a number of time slots opened, and really excited to work with new clients and help them become very successful. And maybe you're thinking right now, can this program do what I say it can do? Can it really help me improve execution and crush my sales numbers? And that's why I don't want to take any money today. Most of these webinars, they ask you to put money up front. I want to speak to you. I want to understand where you're at. And I want to see how I can have a tremendous impact on your execution. And I can tell you the STAR Business Execution Workshop is my best program I've ever offered. And I want to make it easy for you to be successful in 2017. The reality is, if I would have presented this 2 months ago, no one would have been ready. But time is very short. So I just want to share with you, and again, you may want to take this down, www.starresults.com. Let's talk. Okay, these are some of my satisfied clients who are in very senior positions, and this is what they had to say about working with me. And I'll have you read those, and I'll have an opportunity to sip some coffee. That was Stu Fowler of Pierre Bordage, who moved from a business unit manager to be general manager of UK and Ireland at Alcon. We had some really good projects we worked on together, and helped him move through his organization and be successful. Very smart business leader. And of course, Stu Fowler was one of my first clients, and I've had a history of working with Stu over the last 13 years in my business, and we continue to work together. He's president and general manager of Alcon, but also when we started working together, he was a business unit head. And lastly, just to round out testimonials, and I've got a whole bunch on my website of other ones. Todd Damon, who, when I started working with him, was a head of sales. Now he's executive director, sales and marketing at Allergan, and has really benefited from the work we've done together. And he is ready to go with the program. We have a date booked for December 7th and I think 8th. So what you get is, one, my expertise, my 25 years of expertise in the area of leadership, leadership development, and execution. We'll facilitate, we'll come to wherever you're going to be, facilitate a 2-day business execution workshop. We'll write up your plan, and I will be in touch with you once a quarter to make sure things are on track. And all you need to do is book an appointment and find out more about how this would work for you. And this is how I picture folks who I work with. You know, the blue line, or the blue arrow, really looks at what you can do with your great strategies you've put in place. You'll probably have good performance, but the amplifier or the multiplier is great execution. And if you need help in that area, I'm happy to help you. There's not too many folks who are experts in that area, and that will boost your sales up to the red line. So you can sit back like this gentleman, and of course ladies who run business units can have the execution factor, which is really about crushing your sales numbers, not just making them. So if you want to chat, come to www.starresults.com and let's talk. So I want to open things up for questions and answers. I've been talking for, I don't know how many minutes now, probably about 40, and I'm very enthused about this. You know, I'm looking to help companies all over the world, and I've done so in my history and want to continue doing so.